At dusk, Anna stood on the weathered dock by the lake. A thin mist had settled over the water, making it seem as if she was watching through a gauzy veil. Her hands held two small fishing nets wrapped in tattered cloth. She had promised herself she would not come here again, but found that her feet led her back nonetheless. From behind her came the sound of someone walking slowly across the planks of the dock. She turned and saw Henry, an old fisherman with a weathered face and wide shoulders. He paused beside her, looking out at where the lake met the sky. "Thought I might find you here," he said, his voice soft but steady. Anna offered him one of the nets. "I brought these for you." Henry took it carefully, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a net in excellent condition. He ran his fingers over the knots, then looked up at Anna with a slight smile. "Thank you. You know how hard they are to find now?" "Yes," she replied simply. They shared a moment of quiet between them as the lake continued its endless rhythm. Henry spoke again, this time more softly. "You've been here every day." Anna nodded, her eyes still on the water. "It's easier than thinking about other things." Henry turned to face her fully, but he did not intrude or offer words of comfort that would have felt forced and hollow. Instead, he said, "Sometimes it's enough just to be here, isn't it?" She looked at him then, seeing the weariness in his eyes mirrored in hers. They watched together as a loon glided by, its call echoing softly across the water. "Do you ever wish," she started but didn't finish her thought. She hadn't come prepared with answers, only questions left unasked. Henry seemed to understand without her needing to say more. "Sometimes I wonder what else there might have been." The dock creaked slightly as he moved closer, placing a hand on Anna's shoulder in silent support. After a moment, he stepped back and turned his attention to the lake once more. They stood side by side for a long time, each lost in their own reflections. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into an even deeper shade of blue. Henry broke the silence with another soft remark, "The nets were your idea." Anna smiled faintly, turning her head to face him briefly before looking back at the lake. "Just something small." In that moment, she felt less alone, though she knew this feeling would fade as surely as any other. They stood together until it was too dark to see more than shadows on the water. Henry squeezed her shoulder gently and then walked away into the growing darkness without another word. Anna watched him go for a while, his silhouette blurring with the trees until he disappeared from view. When she felt ready, she turned back toward the dock's edge, tucking one of Henry's old nets under each arm. As she began to walk down to the water's edge, her steps were steady and deliberate, though her heart remained lightened by an unexpected touch in the quiet evening air, a single white feather floating gently past on the breeze.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. The feather drifted onto the water, circling slowly with the ripples. Across the quiet riverbank, the sun dropped behind low hills as Liwei sat alone by the familiar shore.
In late autumn, a quiet riverbank was pulled up by the fading light of day. The sky was a faded blue, streaked with soft pink as the sun dropped behind low hills. By the water's edge stood an old wooden boat, its timbers creaking gently in the slight breeze. This is where Liwei, a stonecutter from the village nearby, took his midday break, often sitting alone on this familiar shore. Today, however, something unusual drew him there early before he had planned to rest. As he sat with his lunchbox on the ground, an old woman approached, her basket of vegetables swinging as she walked slowly towards him. Her steps were hesitant but steady, and upon reaching the boat, she paused, looking around. "May I sit here?" she asked quietly, gesturing at a spot near Liwei. Liwei nodded and made space for her on his side of the boat. She thanked him with a slight nod and sat down, setting her basket beside her. They ate in silence for several minutes. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds settling for the evening. After a while, Li Wei couldn't ignore the old woman's sad gaze directed towards the river. He reached into his lunchbox and pulled out an extra bao he had made earlier. "Here," he said, offering it to her with a gentle smile. The old woman looked surprised but accepted the small gift, nodding in gratitude. For a moment, they both stared at the water's surface where ripples spread from stones tossed by ducks swimming nearby. Li Wei thought of his own work cutting stones, shaping them into useful things for homes and temples. He saw how each cut was deliberate, yet could never be undone once made. His hand felt the calluses built up over years of labor. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him with eyes that held a lifetime's worth of stories. "For what?" Li Wei asked, surprised by her confession and uncertain how to respond. The old woman did not answer immediately, but instead opened the lid on her basket and took out a small clay pot. With careful fingers, she began to trace patterns along its rim, as though speaking through touch rather than words. When she spoke again, it was as if the act of forming those patterns had given her courage. "It is for breaking," she murmured, lifting her head to meet his eyes once more. "But not that which can mend." Li Wei nodded slowly, understanding her without her needing further explanation. He reached over and placed a hand on hers where it rested on the pot, both of them feeling its weight together. Then he let go. As if realizing the moment's gravity had passed, she smiled softly at him before packing away the clay pot back into her basket. "Thank you," she repeated quietly, standing up to leave as the sky darkened further with evening shadows creeping along the water. Li Wei watched her walk towards the village path until she was just a small figure against the twilight's glow. He waited until her outline disappeared completely before returning to his lunch and the simple comfort of being alone again on this familiar riverside. Yet, in that moment of shared silence between two strangers, something seemed different, a subtle shift he could almost taste in the air. When she was gone, all that remained were ripples left by a duck's foot upon the water's surface and the soft creaking of old timbers where they met at Li Wei's boat.
Somewhere across the river, a dog barked into the dark. As the day's sun waned to a sleepy eye in the sky, a salt merchant paused beneath a solitary tree on his forest path.
A salt merchant on the road sat beneath a solitary tree at the edge of a forest. The day's sun had waned to a sleepy eye in the sky as he opened his pack and unwrapped a loaf of bread and a bottle of water for his evening meal. As he munched, his attention was drawn by a faint rustling from inside the darkening woods. A figure emerged from between the trees, hesitant at first, then more sure. It was an old farmer who had come seeking salt for his fields in late autumn's chill. The merchant looked up from his bread and met the man's gaze with a nod of welcome. "Good evening," said the farmer, voice rough but kind. The merchant returned the greeting, offering what little space he could under the tree. "Have you traveled far?" "A few miles at least. I'm pleased to find company on this road." They shared silence for a time, each lost in thoughts of home and crops and distant suns. The farmer, ever thoughtful, took off his coat and laid it beside him. He then produced from his own sack a small jar filled with wildflower honey. "Would you like some?" he asked the merchant, who nodded gratefully as he accepted the offering. The two men continued their meal in companionable quiet until the last crumbs of bread were gone. The farmer glanced up at the sky and sighed softly before speaking again. "My son has left for the city," he said with a sadness that touched his eyes but did not dampen them. "He often writes?" the merchant asked, aware of the ache in the farmer's voice. "Not as much as I'd like. He has found other things to do there." The merchant nodded, knowing well the ways young men could be drawn from their roots. "Perhaps he'll return one day with news and good fortune." "I hope so," the old man said quietly. I miss him, of course. But it's not just him I think about. The land needs care now more than ever. The merchant understood this well too. His fields were likewise in need after a hard summer. He considered for a moment before reaching into his pack and pulling out something wrapped tightly. I have extra salt, he said, offering the parcel to the farmer. Thank you kindly, the farmer replied, taking it gently between his hands. After some more time spent under the tree, its leaves whispering secrets as night fell, the two men decided they should part ways. The merchant had a small cottage not far from where the road met the forest's edge, while the old farmer needed to reach home before dark. As they bid each other farewell, the farmer paused and looked deeply into his companion's eyes. Sometimes I wonder if we're alone in this world or just passing through, he murmured softly. The merchant nodded thoughtfully but said nothing more as a cool breeze swept across them, stirring leaves that had not yet fallen to earth. The old farmer turned then, walking slowly back towards the path he'd come from while the salt merchant watched him go until the first star appeared in the sky.
The first star twinkled alone against the deepening blue of evening. In the quiet alley between two clay walls, the rising sun edged into the morning light as an old farmer stood with baskets ready at the entrance.
In the quiet alley between two clay walls, the sun was just beginning to edge into the sky. A narrow path lined with cracked brick and worn cobblestones led deeper into the settlement where life began anew each morning. At its entrance stood an old farmer with a wooden cart full of handcrafted baskets. The air carried whispers of yesterday's dust and today's cool breath. No sounds but the distant bleat of sheep, the soft scrape of his sandals against rough stones, and the rustle of leaves turning to sunlight. The farmer's face showed deep grooves from years of planting seeds in cracked earth and watching them grow. A figure appeared around a corner, the calligrapher with one cataract eye. He wore dark robes that hinted at years spent indoors studying scrolls rather than farming fields, but his hands were strong, calloused from handling brushes soaked in ink. His steps were measured, each footfall deliberate, as if he'd set out knowing exactly where the path would lead. The farmer watched him approach with a neutral gaze. The calligrapher stopped beside the cart and studied the baskets carefully. Each one was woven tightly, with intricate patterns reflecting nature's rhythms, circles for moons, triangles for mountains. I see you have good work here, the calligrapher said, his voice calm. Always try to make them well. There was a slight nod from the farmer, a man who knew hard labor but spoke little about it. The calligrapher picked up a basket, tracing its edges with fingers that had never plowed fields yet understood symmetry and balance in their own way. This one is particularly fine. I thank you for your words, said the farmer, bowing slightly. For a moment, they shared silence, broken only by the faint crackling of paper-thin rice straw used to form the basket's frame. Then, as if summoned from within themselves, each man reached out at once towards something. Two hands that met briefly over an empty space where none had been before. A mutual understanding passed between them. Without speaking further, the calligrapher placed a few coins into the farmer's hand and took his leave down another alleyway leading back to the settlement's heart. The exchange required no more than this simple gesture. No promises were made or expectations set for tomorrow's dawn. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and lights spilled across cracked bricks, leaving shadows that would shift with time, the farmer remained standing there a moment longer before returning his gaze to the cart of baskets, now lighter by several coins, but richer somehow in spirit. He picked up one basket, this one different from all others, and held it close, its pattern telling silent stories about moons and mountains under every finger trace. Finally, he turned back towards home, pushing the cart through alleyways lined with old memories and new hopes, leaving behind only a soft clattering sound of wheels against stone.
Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed against the rising sun. The wooden bridge creaked under the weight of old feet as Mrs. Lynn crossed it slowly, her eyes scanning the water and fields beyond.
The wooden bridge creaked under the weight of old feet as Mrs. Lynn crossed it slowly, her eyes scanning the water below and the fields beyond. She stopped in the middle, leaning over the rail to watch a kingfisher dart after fish in the stream. Across from her stood Mr. Chen, who had been watching her approach from his side of the bridge. "Mrs. Lynn," he called out gently. "Is that a new coat?" She smiled and nodded, brushing the lapels with weathered hands. "It was on sale at the market yesterday. I thought it would be good for these chilly mornings." Mr. Chen nodded in approval. "Very nice. It suits you well." He paused, looking down at the water where the kingfisher had flown back to its perch. "I've been thinking of getting a new fishing rod," he said eventually. Mrs. Lynn laughed softly. "Your rods are fine as they are. But this one is special. I heard it in the shop, something about graphite and sensitivity. I want to feel closer to the fish, you see?" She patted his arm. "Closer or farther? Sometimes being too close means missing things." Mr. Chen looked puzzled for a moment but then smiled, understanding her point without any words needing to be exchanged further. They continued their conversation as they walked towards each other on the bridge until they met in the middle. There was no pressing need for haste, both men and women of their age were accustomed to allowing life unfold naturally around them. "How is your daughter doing with her studies?" Mrs. Lynn asked, turning slightly to look at a willow tree whose branches drooped gracefully over the water. Mr. Chen's face softened into fondness as he answered, "She has decided she wants to teach, like you did." "Ah," Mrs. Lynn said. "It is good that she knows her own mind." They walked side by side across the bridge without exchanging another word until they reached Mr. Chen's side where a row of small pots were lined up on wooden stands. "Do come in for tea," he invited, gesturing towards his workshop. Mrs. Lynn accepted with a warm nod and stepped into the cool dimness of the space that was filled with the faint scent of damp earth from potted plants and drying clay. As she settled onto a cushion beside him at his workbench, Mr. Chen placed 2 cups on another small wooden table between them. He then poured steaming tea from a kettle set to simmer in the background. Neither spoke while they drank their tea, only sipped quietly, occasionally exchanging glances across the cup rims and nodding as if silently communicating unspoken thoughts or shared memories of times past. When she was done, Mrs. Lynn placed her empty cup back on the table beside his with a soft tap that sounded almost like a whisper against the wood. Outside, the kingfisher suddenly took flight again, its swift movements catching their attention momentarily before they returned to their contemplative silence. The bridge creaked slightly under an approaching figure who stepped onto it, and then all was quiet once more.
The shadow of the willow tree crept slowly across the wooden floor as dawn's first light painted the misty riverbank in soft hues. The tea house remains empty, reflecting the quiet passage of time. The empty tea house rests until tomorrow.